Triggers, various triggers. I've had guys come in and tell me they're driving down the road. They'll see rubbish or McDonald's bags, something laying on the side of the road, and before they know it, they're swerving, because over in Iraq, Afghanistan, that could be a bomb. I've had guys tell me that there's guardrails. They swerve when they see a guardrail. If there's going under an overpass, often those are the guys who are speeding up, and it can be dangerous. They also don't like to sit in traffic, because when you sit, you're a target, and when you cluster up, you're a target. So they have those issues that they're having to deal with. Cell phones. Yeah, cell phones often trigger IEDs. So they see somebody on the side of the road with a cell phone, and their first reaction is protect, evade, whatever you have to do. So naturally, this is going to lead to their heart pounding, breathing, just real anxiety. We have sitting quietly. For some, it's going to be hard to sit quietly in a classroom, because they're used to being on guard, being ready to go, being active. Sleepiness. One of the symptoms we see with PTSD is poor sleep. A lot of them don't sleep well. And there's different reasons for that. One of them, again, and I've had guys tell me, I have to protect my house. I need to sleep lightly, and I have to hear everything. And again, in the military, sometimes you must sleep lightly. Sleep deeply, it may be the last sleep you get. You have to be ready to jump at any sight and sound. So consequently, we have a lot of guys with sleep problems. So they might show up in class pretty tired. Couple that with nightmares. Unstructured setting, they're used to structure. College campus isn't always the most structured. They're used to having a place to go, when to go, people following chains of command, people doing what they're supposed to do. And it's not going to be the same for them coming to college. And that fits right in with the campus culture and the climate. People making political statements in a classroom could be tough. People wanting to talk about the war in a classroom could be tough. They just have different things that they have to deal with that a normal student isn't going to have to think about. Privacy. Most of them want to keep it private. If they don't want it private, as far as their military service, they'll talk about it. Very rarely have I ever seen a combat vet sitting out in public talking openly about what they had to do and where they had to go. Usually those are the ones who, and it's not always true, but mostly those are the ones we call the wannabes. The ones who want to be a combat soldier who really weren't, and just kind of taking somebody else's story and making it their own. They don't really like talking about it. They do like privacy, but they do want to know that you care. Other things to be aware of, they often have anniversary dates. These guys will have dates of when they deployed, when they came home, when someone got hurt, someone got injured, when they got hurt, when they got injured. So around that time of year, they may start having problems. They may start getting anxious. They may be a little more irritable and angry. With irritable and angry being real symptoms of PTSD as well. All right, adjustment issues in the classroom. Concentration, focus, memory. If you got intrusive thoughts going through your head, or you're constantly trying to protect everyone and yourself, it's going to be hard to pay attention. So they may have trouble. And if you're not sleeping real well, you get the same problem. That hypervigilance that I talked about, crowds, classrooms, restaurants, etc. Other detachment, avoidance. They're going to avoid talking about it, and they may avoid other people unless they're veterans. The irritability and agitation, again, anger. If somebody asks me what's the number one symptom I've seen over the years of PTSD, I usually tell them it's probably anger. And there's so many things that factor into that. But these guys can get irritable in a hurry. And we do a lot of anger management work. Other issues, following orders, respecting rank, formality, which I talked about earlier, and the anniversary dates. All things that they have to deal with. Treatment. What we're seeing in the there's one quick story I wanted to tell you about. I have this one veteran who served in Iraq. And this is another thing that was triggering him. He came into my office and he goes, and we did some work, and he'd come back, and he was attending Parkland College at the time. And very smart young man. In fact, he had been at West Point for a while, as I'm recalling. Came to the office, he goes, boy, I don't like how I'm feeling out at Parkland. I go, what's the matter? He says, every time I see anyone of Middle Eastern look, I get anxious, I get angry, I get irritable, I get nervous, and I head the other direction. So we talked about what he needed to do to get past this, to try to deal with it, to make it better. So he leaves and comes back, and he comes in my office about a month later, sits down, and he goes, well, Tim, I fixed it. Wait a minute, come on. And I go, what'd you do? His name was Sam. I go, Sam, what'd you do? And what he told me knocked me right off my seat. I almost had to pick myself up off the floor laughing. He decided he was going to just go whole hog and fix this on his own. He went and joined the Islamic Student Association. He was the only Caucasian in the entire room. So he's sitting there, and he made sure his first meeting he went to, he wore an Army shirt that said Army on the front of it. And I think they were more frightened than he was, being the only guy there. And he stayed a member of it. And he eventually, he was doing that as a way of desensitizing himself to Middle Eastern looking people. And it worked for him because one of the guys became his best friend. And it's a long, involved case, but the guy ended up graduating, he went to U of I, got his master's there, and is now out west working. And actually, NPR heard about his story and did a whole radio segment on him a few years back. A very intriguing story. Treatment. There are effective treatments that exist. And I can't go into all of it, but we have what we now call evidence-based therapies. And it's, these are the cognitive behavioral therapies, and that's prolonged exposure therapy, which is one, in cognitive processing therapy. There's also EMDR. Prolonged exposure therapy is simply that. Actually, most guys don't want to deal with what happened. They like to avoid. But avoidance is one of the hallmarks of PTSD. Keeps it alive. So with this particular therapy, we're going to make them talk about what happened over and over and over and over again. It's not that simple. There's more involved to it, but they come in for weekly sessions, 90-minute sessions, and we tape them, and they go home with them. They're going to listen to them at home. Meanwhile, they're going to the mall, the grocery store, different places 4 to 5 times a week to also work on their problem with avoiding crowds, et cetera. So you're attacking it from 2 sides. Very, very effective therapy. Cognitive processing therapy, that's if you can get them to stay in it. Some, as you can imagine, jump out, but there's some great studies on the effectiveness of it. Cognitive processing therapy, we teach them how to identify trauma-related thoughts and change them so they're more accurate and less distressing. They have to do a little bit of work they do some work on the trauma, but it's more about how they think about the trauma. EMDR is eye movement desensitization reprocessing. That's basically a form of exposure therapy, but it's with a finger waving in front of the eyes. And that's something, we could talk long and hard about that one, but I'll leave that one to you guys to go look up. There's also, I didn't put it on here, stress inoculation training, where you teach them how to manage their anxiety and their skill and their anger and help them with their sleep problems. We also do at our clinic, and I think every clinic around the country dealing with PTSD, we have individual therapy, group therapy, we include families, we do a lot of psychoeducation. And for other things, medications, probably 98% of our guys are on an antidepressant to start. Hopefully they're going to get off of that. There's a whole system of phone apps that can be used that are one of them is called PTSD Coach. It's an app they can download to their phones when they're having symptom problems. They get onto the app and it'll tell them what they might want to try. There's another one called CPT Coach for that particular therapy. There's a PE coach. There's even a concussion coach for when they're managing concussion symptoms. Let's skip the other couple. There's a CBTI, which is Cognitive Behavioral Therapy for Insomnia app that they can download that tells them how to get better sleep. There's a Stay Quit for those who are trying to quit smoking app. And if you ever want to look up any information about PTSD and about how it's affecting veterans, go to the National Center for PTSD. It's a website that the VA runs and operates, and it's awesome as far as how much information it has. One last thing, when a bunch of veterans were asked to identify the most helpful thing faculty and staff could do, they responded with a request simply that they be treated with respect. And with that, I thank you.
Well, you're right, Tim. That is a little tough to follow. I don't know any of those fancy terms. I haven't graduated yet, so. Little introduction for me. My name is John Miser. I'm the readjustment counseling technician out of the Vet Center in Springfield. I'm only going to give a little bit about my military, my school, because it's been covered a lot and what we've been talking about today. I did a 02 to 04, '02 to '06 Marine Corps vet, '05 Iraq deployment, and then once I got out, went back to school under the GI Bill. I was a work study. I'm sure you guys heard Kathy at Western talk about that. Upon that point, I took the full-time position at the Vet Center as the readjustment counseling technician, and to this day, I'm still going to school under my GI Bill, so hopefully one day I'll be as smart as you, Tim. Who here has heard of the Vet Center? Anybody? All right, it's better than most. Basically, we are the people in the VA. When I say the VA, I mean the VHA, the Veterans Health Administration, because essentially what we do is address the psychological needs or behavioral health needs that specifically have to do with readjustment issues for combat veterans, and then if that extends to their family members, and then also to include bereavement counseling and military sexual trauma counseling as well. The history part, I've heard a lot of the fancy words used today, readjustment, transition, and stuff like that, but we have been around for quite some time. It was originally coined as the Vietnam Veterans Outreach Program. They basically were Vietnam veterans who broke away from the VA system and started a peer-to-peer counseling program. And basically over time, especially in 1991, as you can see, was when the first time they made the first push to kind of revamp the system and extend the hours and become a real non-traditional agency and be able to work around the clock, work weekends and stuff like that, and determine between the counselors and the people who were designated as outreach people who could go out and find the veterans as they returned home. And then obviously with Iraq and Afghanistan was when they decided to come out with the position called an outreach technician, which is to go out specifically to the post-deployment health assessments, the yellow ribbon 30 and 60-day reintegrations and stuff like that, post-health assessments, basically to shake palms and meet the units within their area and basically help them transfer or transition back home. Here's a list of some of the vet centers. You can find it in any federal VA handbook, or you can just go to va.gov and it's under locations, and then just look under vet centers. But outside of the main 6 that are in the greater Chicagoland area, you can see we're pretty spread out. So that's kind of what makes us unique as well, because we also have the accessibility to travel outside of our catchment area if need be, or get somebody to meet the veterans on their ground, and that's part of what our outreach is about. We can meet at an outstation. A lot of times that's been dubbed as being at a school or university. We've also been blessed with the new telehealth, which we're still learning about, but it can be used. But those are some different options in case we're visiting rural areas where there's not a VA outpatient clinic or a vet center. How to refer a vet. It is a walk-in facility, but we would prefer that the veteran call in. We do have a lot of significant others and family members who call in and have concerns about the family member, but we would like the veteran to call in. But on an outreach mission, what I initially do is have them fill out a contact card, and it'll basically say, hey, do you want to be contacted? And after doing, 5 to 10 to 15-minute conversation assessment, if you will, makeshift assessment, whether or not they're interested in the counseling portion of what we do, I'll take their information and then follow up and contact them within a week or transfer that over to the closest vet center. I'll come back to a more extensive portion of the outreach and then about the mobile vet center and then how to request a mobile vet center at your university. But until then, I'm going to go ahead and pass it off to our counselor, Christine Glannert.
Hi, my name is Christine Glannert, and I am, as John mentioned, a counselor at the Springfield Vet Center, where I've been for about a little over 7 years now. We just wanted to kind of introduce you to our staff. Each vet center is comprised of counselors, office managers, team leaders, outreach technicians, marriage and family therapists, and then also we have the mobile vet center, so it's the mobile vet center drivers and the mobile vet center counselors that reach out to our more rural communities. So here's just the names of the Springfield Vet Centers staff. We have multiple areas of focus at each vet center. Like I'd mentioned, some specialize in marriage and family therapy. We have a couple on our staff that are a CADC, so they're licensed to work with substance abuse disorders. Our team leader, Deanna Kegley, is a music therapist. Tim mentioned a couple of the evidence-based therapy approaches. I'm a cognitive processing therapy provider for the VA. We also provide military sexual trauma services, and I'm the counselor for those as well. Oopsie. There we go. Bereavement services, and that's where we work with any family members of someone who was killed on active duty service. And then we're able to provide individual, couples, group, family counseling. We have 5 counselors on staff, with 1 counselor being outreach and then our outreach staff. We have multiple groups at our vet center, and I'm just speaking of the Springfield Vet Center when I say this. We currently have 4 Vietnam groups. We have 1 World War II and Korea combined theater group. We have 1 OIF, OEF PTSD group. And we have 1 time-limited readjustment group that's of combined theaters. And we have 1 bereavement support group. So what I do love about the vet centers, and I'll brag on them a little, is that whatever the community presents as a need, the vet centers are able to build upon. Some vet centers have a specific women's veterans group, they have a specific MST group, so wherever there is a need in a counseling facility, we can provide that type of program setting group, et cetera. We do function as a walk-in facility. We're open 8 to 4:30 Monday through Friday. We work non-traditional hours, Saturdays, evenings, and we have more recently, probably within the past year, even opened at 6:30 or 7 a.m. as the need provides for veterans who are interested in seeking services prior to going into work. Most of our appointments are scheduled with our counselors, but like I said, we can function as a walk-in facility because that's what we were originally established as. We can refer for all different types of treatment programs within the VA. There's substance abuse programs that we provide clinical support for, MST programs, and then residential post-traumatic stress disorder programs as well. We provide a lot of outreach to our returning veterans in the community, which primarily is John's job and responsibilities that he does an excellent job at. And we work and consult really well with VA and private practice providers to provide a really solid network of support. A strong majority of vet center staff and counselors specifically have served in the military, so I think that's one of the strengths of the vet center program. Our diverse working hours is something that's special. The veteran himself or herself tells us who their family is. And what I mean by that is that we're able to see family members individually just based on the veteran's verbal, disclosure of that they're interested in having their family members seen. So we don't care if it's through marriage, through blood, it really doesn't matter to us. If you're a part, if the veteran wants you to be a part of his or her readjustment experience through counseling services, we will work with that specific family member. This is a service that has been earned by the vet, and so it does not have any time limit to it. We have veterans that seek our services out, go away for months, if not years, then perhaps return. So it has no time limit at whatsoever, and I think that's another one of our strengths. One thing I wanted to read, we see a lot of veterans who are suffering from post-traumatic stress disorder, but we also work on just the readjustment issues in general, whether that's as a couple, as a family, or individually. So it doesn't have to have any type of diagnosis or anything like that. We just work on readjustment issues. This was an article from Runner's World is where I pulled it from. It just was a really interesting description of PTSD that I hadn't really heard of before, so if you'd give me just a couple minutes, I'd like to read it to you. Most people who experience a traumatic event, a car accident, say, or an IED explosion, do not experience lasting effects. For a while, they may flinch at the sight of an oncoming car or jump at a loud noise. That response is normal. It's the body's way of protecting you, of saying, hey, pay attention here, the world's a little unsafe right now. Eventually, the more you drive and the more you're exposed to the racket of day-to-day life, that heightened sense of awareness naturally diminishes. New memories of mundane, crash-free trips on the highway, for example, get laid down over the traumatic one. Your brain recognizes that maintaining anxiety or fear is no longer useful because sustaining such emotions is no longer a matter of life or death. Physiologically, your body quiets down, clearing out the stress hormones, keeping you on high alert. With time, you respond to traffic and fireworks the same way you did before the crash or the explosion. But sometimes, a traumatic event and its emotional and physical aftermath are so devastating that they override the body's ability to recover and move on. For a soldier, it may be a single event like an ambush that killed his or her best friend, but it's often an accumulation of horrors, weeks, months, sometimes years, of navigating a world full of mortars, rockets, bombs, and very bad guys. While he's downrange, his body adapts to the idea that the world is an extremely dangerous place, and the only way to survive is to stay on guard and avoid places where bad things happen. So his body churns out stress hormones that keep him relentlessly on edge. And when he comes home, it's difficult to turn those adaptations, those survivor skills, off. He stays on edge, and the skills that kept him and his buddies alive in Iraq or Afghanistan are suddenly very much out of place. Patrolling his home perimeter, avoiding crowds or stairwells or parked cars, jumping at the dog barking, those skills now become problems. He can't turn the alert down. But the most terrifying, overwhelming, maddening thing of all is that he's suddenly in a crowd or has to drive in a congested city center, talk about certain things. His body unleashes a barrage of fight or flight sensations so powerful that it can feel like he's about to die. It makes no sense to him to feel mortal danger when he enters the grocery store, or drives his kids to school, or tries to answer a question about a patrol last February. But those sensations and his lack of control over them are so awful, he quits doing whatever the hell triggers them. Quits going out, driving, or talking much. And when that happens, the disorder has taken him captive. Because the only way to overcome profound distress is to confront it. Over and over and over again until his brain and body accept that when he drives down the highway, talks about the patrol, or walks among parked cars, nothing bad happens. In a cruel twist, the disorder seeks to keep him safe by diminishing his joy and depriving him of that joy. And that is PTSD. I'll turn it over to Joe now.
Hello? I gotta get this adjusted for a normal sized person. There we go. I'm gonna talk over eligibility really quick at the vet centers. We do have a little bit of different criteria than the VA. As you can see, we were established for combat veterans after the Vietnam conflict ended, and we've since opened up to any veteran that served in any armed conflict from World War II up into present global war on terrorism. I mean, a lot of that's pretty basic: Korea, Vietnam, Lebanon, Grenada, Panama. Those are simple. The interesting thing on OIF and OIF is there's a lot of conflicts going on around the world that don't include Afghanistan and Iraq, and what we look for in our criteria is what they call the Global War on Terrorism Expeditionary Medal. There's two medals for that. There's a Global War on Terrorism medal that's given to any soldier, sailor, Marine or airman that serves during the Global War on Terror, so from 2001 until present. But then there's also an expeditionary, which means they were deployed in support of, which doesn't necessarily mean they were deployed to Afghanistan or Iraq. There are, missions being run in the Philippines. Kuwait will count. Italy. There are, these other bases and areas where we're operating in support of. Africa is another area where you can earn that medal. So as, when you're working with your veterans who are students and stuff and you're looking for sources to refer them to, find out about that, and if they're eligible, please refer them over to us. The other things we're open to is survivors of military sexual trauma. The key word in that is trauma, not necessarily assault. How that is defined by the Vet Center is, any sort of sexual contact, innuendo, or harassment that has ended up traumatizing that person, he or she, at which point they can come in and seek our services. This is eligible to members of the Guard and Reserve. They do not have to be on federal orders in order to come into our office. So if you have students who are also in the National Guard or in the Reserves and do their 1 weekend a month and 2 weekends out of the year, if something happens to them during that time when they're on state orders, they can come in and seek our services, and we will see them. Bereavement counseling, we do work with Gold Star military families, and we have like a group that meets at our Vet Center, and that as an actual group, and we provide individual counseling for family members. Once again, with Gold Star military family, it is a soldier, sailor, airman, or Marine that dies while on active duty. They don't have to have passed in conflict. It can be while they were stationed in Germany or while they were stationed here statewide if it happened in a training accident or just an accident while on leave or off hours. Finally, when it comes to what is it we do is the definition of readjustment counseling. Before you on the slide, there's a nice big write-up that, as being part of the federal government, we have definitions for everything, and, if they're not long enough, we'll find a way to make it longer. Plain and simple, everybody at our facilities, we're social workers, we're counselors, and we're psychologists. We do not diagnose there. All right, we're not coming in to put a label on you. You don't have to have a diagnosis to come in. We don't have to give you one to stay, and you don't have to leave one. Readjustment is what that veteran needs it to be. All right, a lot of veterans come in because they just want a place to vent, and that's as good a place to start to any, because they're coming back from deployment and they're feeling these pressures of trying to transition into school, and they're dealing with their families, and they don't have a place to turn. So they'll come in and they'll feel like their world's coming around, and then maybe just that 50 minutes a week of having a place to come in and somebody to talk to is enough to help them out. But at the same time, we're not trying to say, okay, well, if you're struggling with school or anything else, you obviously have PTSD. That's the wrong answer. That's not what we're here for. All right? Added stress. Everybody gets out typically of the military with some sort of plan in mind. Rarely does that plan go step by step by step by step. I know when I got out in 2006, my plan was to go to school, which is great. I got out in February. Guess what doesn't start in February? So now what am I doing for 6 months? Well, I might be able to take summer school, but I already had most of my electives out of the way. So now I'm sitting around for 7, 8 months going, well, why did I get out? Why I should have just extended. And all these pressures are coming in. And I don't know where to turn to, and I'm looking for a place to help. That's where we can be. All right, the vet centers are a great place to start. We are a great referral source throughout the community. Another thing is, with us only seeing combat veterans and victims of sexual assault and bereavement, to get into our system is very, very easy. For any of the veterans here that have applied to the VA, you call in, they send you the paperwork, or you do it online, you send it in, a couple weeks later, you get your first appointment, hopefully within the next couple weeks, if not a little longer. If a veteran can bring in a DD-214, they can be seen at our facilities. That's it. We have a one-page VIF form that we input all the information, and even if they just come in and say, I forgot my DD-214, I go, well, if you can bring it next time, that'd be great. But at no point are we going to say, stop coming here. But our point is like, we may not be able to see you that day, but if you show up, we should at least be able to see you within the next week or two. We can get veterans in. It's a very, very simple system to get into. And once I say it, coming in to see us does not require a diagnosis at any point or time. And then here's Christine again.
Whoa, Joe, you were tall. We're playing musical chairs a little bit here.